Okay, we are now live on all platforms. This is Deal Flow Live. Welcome, welcome. We're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram today. I am one of your hosts, Brody Vinson.
And I am your other host, Ryan Santo.
And today we are talking about service-based businesses. Specifically, we've got a commercial cleaning business pulled up for you today to start things out. We're going to kind of dive into a few different businesses like this one that are, service-based businesses where you might be able to buy these and grow them. And we're going to talk a little bit about what some of these deals might actually look like, how they might play out, how you would structure a deal like this, but also most importantly, is this business fairly priced? And do we think it's a good tangible deal for how it's listed? So Ryan, what are your first thoughts on this cleaning business?
I love cleaning businesses because people hate to clean first and foremost, but also it's not difficult to understand how this business operates. You learn the chemicals, you learn the equipment, it takes a very little time. You're really learning more the routes, the sales, the customers. You're solely basically giving a very low barrier to entry business and you're stepping right into a larger one like this. I mean, this is something where with enough time and effort, you could just start your own if you really wanted to, but that's not why we're here. We want to get a jump ahead of that. So I love these because you can bolt them on, you can expand them easily. If you've got a good customer base, a lot of times buildings and other larger entities have contracts for extended cleaning. So it's a lot of recurring revenue that's baked right into these most of the time. And I was just saying before this recording happened, we've all seen those videos on TikTok, YouTube, whatever, of like somebody cleaning a rug or just cleaning something. And it's so satisfying to watch. So you can do a lot of marketing with that, just doing your job, no real effort needed.
And that's something that's so interesting about so many of these service-based businesses that Ryan and I look at, like the ones that we've gone further and kind of looked into deeper, maybe got some information on even the name of the company and kind of continue to explore. So many times they are not really doing much from a marketing perspective. We've looked at ones that have literally no website. We've looked at ones that aren't on social media at all. And there's a lot of opportunity to take these businesses and inject some of that actual marketing and just continue to grow them with some decent practices, getting their name out there a little bit more. And so this is something that I think is, just a really massively undertapped opportunity and area, something that should really be, taken advantage of more. But let's go ahead and dive into this particular deal. So this commercial cleaning business, it's in Polk County, Florida, not too far from us.
Polk County has a decent proximity to Tampa Bay, that city area. So your customer base is pretty wide. And it's also not too far out from Lakeland, which is another very large and up and coming city. We were just talking about that recently with a couple other people about how Lakeland is poised to do not to do a growth, but to have massive growth, because as Tampa and Orlando start to expand and develop their larger financial and business sectors, a lot of people are going to be moving to those areas because they don't want to live in the middle of a city. So there's a lot of untapped and future potential that's possible with something in this location.
It's true. So it's a great area right off the bat. It is listed for $1.6 million and it's doing $480,000 in cash flow, meaning really just the profit of the business. So what do you think of the price point here, Ryan, right off the bat? What's your opinion?
I personally like it. It's under a 4X and it's over $1 million in, I believe,
revenue.
Yeah, the rev is over $1 million. So like we always say, when you're over $1 million, you're going over 3X. I think that I think the revenue to asking price ratio is pretty fair. They're only asking about $500,000 more, but at 480, you're almost making about a third of that purchase price back per year if nothing changes and everything stays the same. But obviously we want to make money. So if you just grew this thing maybe 5-7% per year, just like conservatively, you'd be paying this loan off very quickly within 5 years or less, and you'd still be profiting a couple $100,000 a year easily. So I think it's pretty fairly priced given the niche nature of it. And we don't even know if they have any clients. Like if they have recurring revenue streams, if they have all that other stuff baked in, it's more than worth it. They've done the heavy lifting.
I think it'll be good for us to do a little bit of a deeper dive.
Are they double-digit employees?
It looks like 18 employees. And
Oh,
actually, we have
yeah.
a question
Okay.
already. So we have a question from Manas157. Thank you for your question, Manas. They said, "Hi, where do you see the business services sector heading in terms of M&A?" I would love if you could kind of chip in and mention maybe some particular business services. But right off the top of my head, I'm thinking things like financial services, which is what Ryan works in. I'm thinking accounting, legal, things like that. It really depends on the individual sector, and that's why I ask. So let us know if you have any particular sectors in mind that you're curious about. But something like accounting, for example, is really, really ripe for mergers and acquisitions. Because if you think about it, and actually, I know this because I'm working on an accounting business right now where it's a client of mine on the consulting side that we're working on selling. And the thing with accounting is that, um, you know, a larger, more established accounting firm can very easily come in and integrate those clients into their system. If they're established, if they've got some more bandwidth, some people doing the labor that can come in and like integrate that, I think it's very ripe for acquisition and for M&A. Something like financial services, that's where things get a little bit tough because where my mind is going is like financial representatives and things like that, personal financial representatives. Usually it's looked at as more of like a book of business. And what I would look for in things like that is if the businesses and the clientele are very tied to the owner and the relationships of the business, then that's where things get really tough because you could very easily acquire that business and try to take it on, and all of a sudden, the clients don't want to stick around because their guy is not there anymore. What do you think, Ryan?
I think you hit the nail on the head there with many different services, whether it's financial planning or accounting. If it's a direct business where the owner is heavily involved, you're going to have to do a bit of a transition time, and you do have that possibility that people aren't going to stick around because they're tied to the owner. But if you find a business where the owner has, removed themselves for the most part, the people working in it are pretty much running it day to day or are involved in the customer relationships and they're more involved in the back end as the owner, you're going to have a pretty good set. But it is more or less a book of business you're buying at the end of the day, unless you yourself are in that industry. If you're a CFP or you're some sort of financial professional and you're buying to jump into the industry, it's a good deal no matter what, because you're just kind of kicking off your career and stuff. But if you're coming in without the knowledge or certifications that the person running the business has, you might have a harder time because they know a lot more about it and they might be tied to them being their servicing person. So that's where I see it for the financial services sector.
That's really true. I think to Ryan's point and kind of piggybacking off of that, I think within professional services and business services, the having of whatever licensure is needed, obviously you have to have the license, but the having of whatever license is needed for the business and the experience and expertise within that industry, I think is a little bit more important than some of these lower grade, like more entry level type of ones. Like this cleaning business that we're looking at, it's Ryan said early on, it's a very simple business to wrap your head around, to grasp. If you're looking at something like an accounting business, if you don't have any kind of background in accounting, that's a big learning curve just to get over in the first place before you're ready to run that business. So I think it's important that you have like some kind of industry experience or expertise. If you're like an individual buyer or something. As far as like larger scale mergers and acquisitions, these companies are buying each other all the time. It's like even more commonplace than with some of these smaller mom and pop type businesses.
Yeah, there's a lot of competition right now with the financial firms, specifically in the private equity world. I think you see a lot of stuff going on and being talked about now, even with private equity firms doing private equity deals with other firms. The sort of small shark, big shark tactic just got written about recently in the Wall Street Journal or the Times. And they're hyper targeting these industries like accounting and stuff because they got a Rolodex of people. They got plenty of professionals with decades of experience that they can slot right in and go. I'd say that as an individual, and I'm not going to, I think that you're looking also at needs and wants sometimes. Like cleaning is a want. You want to hire a cleaner. but you need your accounting done, which is where kind of that level of complexity starts to kind of fork.
Sure. We have another question too.
Mhm.
Sumer Kuma says, do you buy 51% and let the operator continue, or do you place in new management? This is
That's a good
completely,
question.
it's a really good question. And, what he's asking for anyone kind of looking for clarification on that is if we were, let's take this cleaning company, for example, if we were to buy this cleaning company, do we buy the whole 100% of it for 1.6 million, or do we buy about just over half of it just to take controlling ownership so that we're in charge of what happens with the business, but then keep the previous owner on? And to answer your question, it is completely dependent on the deal. There's some people that want to sell their business and they really have no interest in staying on. And in that case, you can't really keep them on. Usually from the private equity perspective, you're looking at like, is there enough cash flow to support either keeping them on as a CEO or to support bringing a CEO on? So for example, the reason that private equity often only looks at deals where the cash flow or the EBITDA is $1 million or more is because they want to be able to have that million or so in cash flow and still have someone running the business that is not them. So the types of deals that we typically look at, we want to see that million plus in cash flow for that exact reason. But to answer your question, as far as like an idealistic perspective, the strategy where that is really most common from what I've seen is if you're doing some kind of roll up play. So if you're going out, I have a partner in the space now that recently did a roll up of HVAC companies that was completed a couple of years ago, where he went out, bought 5 of them and combined them within 2 years and eventually sold them as a package. And in that case, a lot of the time, the pitch and the go-to offer is to buy around like 80% of the company or so. And this is typically what he likes to do, buy about 80% of the company. And then you've got the controlling ownership and most of the ownership, but the owner usually has a good bit of like skin in the game still to make things happen. And it depends on if the owner is willing to do that or not. It depends how motivated they are to just get out of the business. Is selling the business to them just about, getting the most money possible and really maximizing that? Or is it about getting rid of it, getting out? Is it about retiring? Really depends on what the owner is trying to do, to answer your question. What do you think, Ryan?
I think I think the 51-49% is very common in the larger business world, i.e., when it comes to stocks and much more large and impactful companies. That's a strategy that a lot of people employ, are taking majority shareholder ownership. When it comes to business sites like this, normally you'll see people are there to sell their whole business. Where you get into the 51-49% owner, seller, finance, all this other sort of minutia is when you're in the negotiation tables talking with the broker or the owner direct. Nobody comes to the table on these sites specifically to sell a portion. They're selling the whole thing. What you're doing is you're basically saying in your negotiation, I'd like to keep on X. Can you keep X? And you're really working that in through a lot of knowledge, understanding of the business, because unless you're doing a roll-up like us and you have previous experience, you're going to want to keep that person on for something. And most people stay on for free, but to a certain degree, you're going to want to keep them on as what has been coined as schmuck insurance, meaning don't just toss this thing onto me, making it look good. You've made it look good for the last 3 years, but it's actually just a sinking ship. Any owner that won't stay on with a small percentage, we will not work with. Even if it was just 5%, we'll walk away, because if you're trying to just dump this thing, we're offering you free money essentially to stay on just as a consultant for most cases.
Well, it's also a signal, it's kind of a signal of the business might be in trouble. Like if you're not willing to stay on at all,
yeah,
it's a signal of like there's skeletons in the closet of some kind or something.
Like I said, they could doctor the books for 3 years and make it look all nice and pretty. We get in there and we find that the last 10 have been horrible.
Sure.
So, to that point,
we've got a follow up to that question, and we've got another question. We've got them rolling in, people. We're gonna
love it.
We're gonna answer your questions tonight, so keep bringing them going. So Samir said, thanks for the validation, brother. Have been thinking about the model. I work on buying out 51% of pet retail companies based in Southeast Asia and India. That is a wildly cool niche. I hope that's going well for you. That sounds...
My man, if you need a hand, let me know. I'm pretty familiar with that industry.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. So that's actually Ryan's background. And so his family business is pet services. Specifically like dog training, grooming, and like a few different services rolled into one. So definitely find Ryan on LinkedIn. Get in touch with him if you've got some questions about that, or if you want help, because he's all about that space and really bullish on it. Find him at Ryan Santo on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And we have another question as well. But just to kind of cap that off, Samir, I'd say that the final point I would like to make on that is when you're thinking about the model, think about whether it's incentivizing the person staying on, and think about whether, buying 51% is enough of an attractive proposition for the average one that makes the most sense for you. Those are the two big things I would be thinking.
You're in a great industry though, dude. Keep it rolling. You got a lot of good bones in what you're doing, so stay on the pace.
Absolutely. And those are majorly growing markets too.
Keep us updated.
Good place to be.
Want to keep hearing from you.
And then Manas 157 again has another question. How would you maximize or increase the sale price of a business? And do you recommend any changes in the business? This is how I got started in this whole thing. So I have a consulting company called Scale for Sale. It's exactly what it sounds like. I help people scale for the purpose of selling for the most money possible. And that's how I actually got into mergers and acquisitions in the first place after selling a business of mine. There are many things that I would recommend doing to increase the sale price of a business. But if we're trying to break it down into like a few of the most key components, the very number one thing is going to be the profit of the business. Not only does the price that you can get for the business go up as your profit goes up, it doesn't just go up linearly, it goes up exponentially, because the bigger the profit gets, the higher chunks of multiples you get. So Ryan earlier in the episode mentioned, if it's doing around $1 million or so in sales, probably a decent expectation, it's around like a 3x multiple or something, depending on the profit. And so if you follow that up though, the higher the profit gets, once it gets above like a 2 million profit business or something, then you're talking more like a 5, 6, 7, even 8x multiple, something in that neighborhood. And then if it gets to like a 10 million profit business or more, then you're talking like double digit multiples plus. So it continues going up like that. So profit, absolutely the number one thing. If you're talking about keeping the business really where it's at and just changing little things, you can change the service mix. That's a big thing in service. So a lot of times we find that service businesses, take this cleaning company again, for example, they might be doing a few different types of cleanings. Maybe they're doing emergency cleanings where like something like really drastic happened and it needs a big cleanup. Maybe they're doing all things like that. That is actually a detractor from the value of the business, because it's not recurring revenue. It's not like revenue that's going to continue to happen regularly. The flip side, and what would be better, and this is a commercial cleaning business, so it's a little bit less attractive. What's better is a residential cleaning business that has mostly just repeat clients that they're servicing over and over again. Maybe they're even on a subscription or something, because then that recurring revenue is just more dependable for someone who's acquiring it, and they have a good understanding that it's going to continue to grow. And the last big rock that I would mention, and I'll let Ryan give his opinion here in a second too. The last big rock that I would mention though is having some kind of management already ready in place to run the business besides yourself. If you're trying to sell it and you're the owner and you're the one that's running everything, running the whole show, it's not going to be able to sell for quite as much unless you're very, very flexible on terms. What else would you say, Ryan?
When it comes down to businesses like this, I think that it's important to remember that commercial does not mean like what we see in HVAC or trades, where it could be new construction, which is, unless the builder is giving out contracts and allowing the people to offer contracts with the new home purchases, it is a one and done. I think there's value for cleaning and many of these trades in both commercial and residential. I understand both sides of the coin. I would say that not having a mix is definitely preferred because it gets a little muddy when you're now servicing an apartment complex and then a neighborhood. I think it's good to specialize in these regards. But for a commercial cleaning company, if they have a number of office buildings and the contracts are there and they've been renewing these contracts for years at a time, or they've had a couple renewals already, I'm going to take that because I know that these guys they're human. When we find something that's comfortable, that works, and that's easy, we're just going to keep signing it. And odds are the people who are signing these things are not the people who are making those decisions, and they've just decided these guys do a good job. We don't want to rock the boat. It's too much work to go and hunt another bunch of bids. Just keep using these guys. So I like that for this business. If it was a personal cleaning business, like I've told you a couple people have out in Lake Nona, we've talked about my friend who, he's found 3 different cleaning companies, and each one varies wildly depending on what they'll do for what price point. It can kind of get muddied, and then people start to price check and all that. I won't tick away a box for it being not mixed or not having a residential. So I don't think it's necessarily a good or bad thing. It more depends on that history. Like if this was commercial and it only ever had like 1-year contracts with a bunch of different places, then I'm leaving. But if it was like recurring with a couple major buildings and they've been expanding, I'm really excited because that means they have relationships and I can keep those going, and then I can work on expanding those out.
I think it really depends. If you're in the commercial sector, I think it really depends on the area too. If it's like a really growing like area like Central Florida is where we're at right now, then being in the commercial game can be a really good thing. If there's like a really bustling commercial sector, also depends on what your plans are. The biggest reason that I think that private equity kind of doesn't look for as much commercial is because if the market overall changes quickly, if there's like another COVID or something like that, then that's going to get shaken up a lot. And that's the microscope, so to speak, has been a little bit tighter since then, I think.
But that's where I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because during COVID, what do you do with a cleaning company or any sort of like? You start offering disinfecting services. You pivot. You immediately swap to whatever people need because you have this stuff already. And I saw a lot of people do that. Like we had a cleaning company at my mom's building, and immediately COVID hit. A month later, they have COVID cleaning services. They were coming in monthly and disinfecting it because COVID, it's everywhere. So we were still paying them. They were still coming in and making as much and probably more because they had new equipment and stuff on the contract. But stuff like that, I mean, you also remember in the residential sector, people are going to lose their jobs when those things happen. So you might lose, depending on, unless you've targeted that super ultra clientele. You know, like you said, though, geography is your best friend or your worst enemy. Like I wouldn't take this if it were, say, Dubuque, Iowa, but in Orlando or Nashville, or I love Dubuque, Iowa, don't get me wrong, or like New York City. Every day I'm taking this. So, you know, I think we both collectively have made one cohesive argument of how detailed you have to be when observing a listing, because we've shown both sides of this right now. So sorry if that was overwhelming, but that's just how we think about this.
And I was going to say, that's kind of how this show goes, ladies and gentlemen. It takes Ryan and I a good 10 minutes to cohesively make one argument between the two of us. Sorry if we're ever long-winded. We just like details.
Bro, we love deals.
We love deals, and we love to get into the details of
deals. We love
deals,
people asking questions.
Which we have a couple more comments and questions. So C. Tucker Anderson says, I joined the video late. What industry are you rolling up? There's actually a couple that we're working on right now. I can't talk about them all, but the biggest one that I can talk about is HVAC. So heating, ventilation, and air conditioning companies. This is an industry that Ryan and I both absolutely love. And I'll give you a few of the reasons for it, and I'll let Ryan give some of them as well, because there's a lot of good reasons. One of the reasons is we're talking about this whole recurring revenue thing, and whether it's been done already or whether it hasn't, there's a huge opportunity to expand recurring revenue in HVAC beyond a lot of different services. The opportunity essentially is, I always describe it like this: the same way that the same way you get your oil changed in your car, so that you don't just break down on the side of the road one day. It makes a lot of sense actually to charge that way for HVAC as well, to do maintenance of HVAC systems so that it doesn't just break on you one day and leave you with no AC or something, or no heating. So there's a lot of savvy HVAC companies now and acquisition entrepreneurs getting into HVAC that have seen that have realized that need and that ability to do that, and they get maintenance contracts with their customers, whether commercial or residential. So they get contracts with these either houses or commercial outlets to continue servicing the maintenance of the machine on like a once a year, twice a year basis or something like that, depending on the area. And then you pay monthly typically as the customer. What's great about that is those customers just kind of continue producing profits and revenue as you go forward. And it creates less of a bottleneck operationally, because you're not having to just service emergencies all the time, right? You've got stuff that you can schedule out. The ideal case scenario is an HVAC business that's doing literally nothing but maintenance contracts and no emergency work, because literally everything is just standard checking in, servicing the machine, checking it out. It's all regular revenue, and it's pretty understandable and chill.
Grant is correct. We are long-winded kings. Thank you, Grant.
Yeah, Grant says we are long-winded kings. But I know he's coming from a place of appreciating that, because Grant can also be a long-winded king sometimes.
So I think to your point, it's a very, it's great to have that ideal situation is pretty much what you grow on. I mean, I probably spend most of my day thinking, researching, and diving into strategy development, implementation, and ways to make business as streamlined as possible while accounting for as much of the incalculables as you can. I have a fascination with operations and strategy and growth. And it's the best. So like Brody said, you want to get to that point where you're doing 80% scheduled work, and that 20%, I always say 20% is your life happens type stuff. It's like why everybody should have an emergency fund, because life doesn't tell you, hey, Friday it's going to be a bad day. So it's one of those industries where you definitely need it. It's always going to be needed. And it's also an industry where loyalty is important. If you service somebody's house and they like you, they like your techs, you treat them well, you showed up to that emergency on the 4th of July when their AC blew, they're going to tell everybody, and everybody wants to be treated well. So if you treat the people that work with you well, it will usually go a long way. And it's just one of those industries where you can really, it's one service, it's a style, and you can even, like an accordion, expand it out as much as you want to encompass other stuff. You can get certifications for hood cleaning for restaurants. Same thing. You can get specialties for specialty freezer and refrigeration things. You can do larger stuff. I mean, there's a versatility with it that is incredible, similar to the other trades where you can get specialties in those. But when you think about, this electric and plumbing, which are what we call the trifecta of perfection, it's just unmatched. And like, if I told you, hey, no AC, you're not going to be happy with me, but you're going to go get it fixed, and you're going to pay what you need to get it fixed.
So true. We have some more comments and questions as well.
Yes,
Samir from before says, I built the largest doorstep pet grooming company in India, one of the top 4. That is a hell of an accomplishment, Samir. What a great niche. And
congratulations, man. That's impressive.
It is. What a great niche in a rapidly growing market.
That's a huge, that's just for, India is one of the, they're going to probably, I think they're the largest country in the world per people wise, right? That's a lot of competition out there that he had to really fight against. So that's big, man. Congrats.
Yeah, you must have really been onto something. So great job there. Whatever tactics you're on, I want some of it, because you must have really been onto something there. Good stuff, and keep going with what you're doing. We also have Corey Dennis, and Corey, I see that you DM'd me, so I'll definitely check that after the show. I appreciate that. But Corey said, my partners and I are starting our commercial real estate private equity firm and have a deal in the pipeline. Right now, we're struggling with raising capital because of the lack of track record, and we're new to the industry. He doesn't really necessarily have a question here, but I had him message me offline just to talk some more. But I wanted to bring up this comment because I think, this is something that's very prevalent and something that we've kind of dealt with as an emerging private equity firm as well. The biggest thing that we realized as we got into this and really started diving in, sinking our teeth in and spending some time in it, is there's a few ways to go about this. One of them is having a deal in the pipeline like Corey's talking about, and really going out and like finding that perfect deal and just bringing it to the right investors. It really depends on your situation. If you have a really large investor network already,
it sounds like he's kind of started. It sounds like him and his friends kind of started from scratch. So
similar to what we're doing.
A little bit, but you've had a couple under your belt too. So you came to the party with a little bit, and everybody else kind of did too. So I think he's going from a very literal 0 to 1. And that's impressive. He has a deal in the pipeline already, because that's the hardest part.
That is the hardest part. And, I've been talking about this a lot lately. When we first got into this whole private equity thing, we just assumed that it was go out and raise some capital and then start buying businesses. And it's actually kind of the opposite. It's really like, for you to be taken seriously in getting capital, you kind of have to have a deal in the pipeline. And so what I would tell you, Corey, is if you have a good deal in the pipeline, and ask yourself that question: is it really a good deal? Like, is it like an outperformer? And do you have like legitimacy behind saying that? Do you have some kind of industry experience or some kind of knowledge backing that up? But if it's a great deal and it's like a motivated seller or a motivated party that's making it happen, then what has been kind of successful for us is taking that to larger firms or more well-capitalized firms that have been in it longer and kind of working it up the chain and just bringing that opportunity there. So even if you don't have the funding all at once and you don't have that track record, a really great way to build that track record can be to kind of work alongside some of these more established firms and allow them to bring the capital while you bring the deals. I always joke that it's like the emerging private equity firms like yours, like mine. We're almost like the interns for these bigger ones, because we go out and we find the deals, we bring them to the table, but they have the money at the end of the day. So just be prepared for the economics of deals like that to not be, a majority in your favor. But the alternative is that you go out and you raise that capital yourself. And a lot of times it's like a chicken or the egg kind of situation that's hard to handle. So that's kind of what's been a good experience for us. The other great thing about that is if you do kind of like work with one of these larger firms that's been doing it for a while, and you can really, really establish a lot of track record quickly working on a bigger deal than you might be able to work on your own. A lot of times these bigger deals have a little bit more security baked into them too, because they're just bigger deals. And believe it or not, that a lot of times they are actually a little bit safer than smaller deals. Another thing I would say is, with these really big deals, if you're working with a larger firm that's been at it a long time, they just have much better practices than you. And that's not a dig at you in any way. It's not a dig at me or anyone else with an emerging firm or fund, but they typically just have way better practices and understand this at a much higher level. So you can learn a lot and actually kind of like expedite your own career by like learning from the best while you're working on it with them. So just a really interesting way to approach it that we've seen. What do you think, Ryan?
I think my question would be, on your team, does anybody have real estate knowledge in the area?
That's a big one.
If you're coming to the table and nobody's got the experience per se in commercial, because commercial and residential, two very different things, and all the agents will tell you about it. Either A, someone needs to go and become an agent or get the education, or, in my opinion, in the way that I've built relationships with people is, everybody, and this is a group, so everybody's got to be on board with this one. Maybe you just take a commission on the deal and you basically broker it to a larger company and develop a relationship with the people who do those deals. Because if you bring good deals to somebody and you make money off it, and you do that a couple times, and you say, hey, we now have some money from these deals. We have capital. You know us. You know the deals we bring. we want to partner now, which is to me a way that you could very easily build a reputation because people talk, and also show them that you're kind of willing to not just be a very transactional thing, but you're trying to build something larger. So that's my thought on it. Maybe it's best to just be the deal provider to start. And then after a couple good ones, you'd say, look, you've paid us, we're making money over here. We want to partner on a deal. I take a small percentage.
And if you develop that track record, the kind of light at the end of the tunnel of like doing a deal that way the first time is you might be able to get it done completely on your own the next time around, because you then have that track record. If you go out and work on a major deal, get some outstanding outcome, a partner that I have now has kind of done it this way already. And now was able to spin off on his own and be kind of what they call an independent sponsor. And it's because he went out and he built himself a track record by working with these large firms and, having the resources that they have, and just put in a lot of hard work that way. And so it's just a really good way to kind of like get yourself started. And the reason I would do it that way, and why we're attracted to doing it that way versus just like going to work at an investment banking job or some like low level analyst position at a private equity firm, is one, because we have some experience that allows us to really spot value creation opportunity, and we have an understanding of the mergers and acquisitions area and an ability to kind of traverse it and understand it without being lost in it. But two is there's just a lot more upside, right? If you're working like an analyst position in a private equity firm, you're not really the one that gets to make these decisions. You don't learn quite as fast. You might learn really fast because you might be looking at a large volume of transactions.
You'll learn.
You will learn fast, but you're also not learning at the highest level. And I was personally really attracted to learning at the highest level. Like how are the people at the very top of the transaction making the decisions, and what do they think through? What do they need to see? And you don't always see that stuff at the lower levels.
But also people who are working as an analyst, that if you get into IB or private equity or M&A, your goal is that top level. And most of the time, people who work in those industries, they'll spin off and do their own farm. Like if you look at the LinkedIns of the guys who do their own stuff, it's such a small world of like Goldman Sachs and stuff. But there's as many, if not more, that are like the rest of us that are just like, we're just going to wander in here and just take the hits, but keep on moving and learn just by trial by fire. So there's many ways to go about it, and you got to find the way that works for you. We actually have somebody, a friend of the show, coming on next in January, actually, who wrote an entire book about how he started in corporate America and managed to, while working in corporate America, build himself out with his own private equity that he made basically with him and his wife. He's a great guy. He's a friend of the show, and he's dropping a book about his entire journey. So be on the lookout for that one too.
It'll be a really good one. He came on the show before. His name is Bill. If you want
Bill Rogers, yeah.
Bill Rogers. If you want to look into the previous episode, it was a really, really good one where he actually dropped specific deals that he was working on and talked about like how they'd played out, how they worked, and that sort of thing. And he's got some new stuff in the pipeline that should be really interesting to go over here pretty soon. Let's see. We have
a couple questions
more. Just a couple comments. Yoshi said, OMG, hello. Hello back to you, Yoshi.
Hello, Yoshi.
And Corey, you're welcome. I am looking forward to talking to you and just hearing a little bit more. We actually have a real estate deal in our pipeline as well. Maybe we can collaborate somehow. And I think that's all the questions for now. We're actually at 6:48 right now. So
a little bit of a shorter one tonight, guys. Sorry, we've booked ourselves pretty tight recently. So
it's true. So we looked at one deal tonight, but we got to answer a lot of questions.
That's the most important part, is that we're helping people figure stuff out. And like the point of the show is that this is like where people who are in the comments we also want to hear your feedback on what we're talking about and what everybody else is, because the only way we get smarter is by sharing. So like share the knowledge. Let's all talk. Let's all ask questions. Let's all get smarter together.
Exactly. And we do this show every week, around Tuesday around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So tune in, bring your questions, bring your comments, just like you did tonight. These are our favorite types of episodes to do, where people are coming in like Sumer, who built the largest pet grooming service business in India.
Incredible.
Crazy stuff, really awesome. Or people like Corey that are really an emerging firm manager, like ourselves. Just kind of like trying to figure this out and build it from the ground up. Bring your comments, questions, tell us what you're working on, ask about like our opinion on it. Feel free to bring specific industries that you want to be seen, or any particular deals that you want us to analyze as well. If there's something that's listed online that we could take a look at on the show, we're happy to do a specific one.
And next week, we got a very special guest coming on the show. Somebody we've been trying to get on for a while, but due to scheduling, he's just been so hard to get a hold of. But finally, we locked him down for an episode. So we're excited. He's got quite a bit under his belt. So it's going to be a good episode. Make sure you guys tune in. He's quite the player in the industry that we get to have on here. So very excited.
And Sumer, Ryan is not on Instagram, but I just put it in the chat. It's Ryan Santo on LinkedIn, spelled just like that. RIAN, and then last name SANTO.
Did you just put an I in my name?
No, RYIN.
RYA.
RYAN.
It's 4 letters.
RYAN. Sorry. I'm struggling to speak tonight. But yeah, Yoshi, definitely tune in next Tuesday. I appreciate that. Sumer, thank you again for joining in. You're so right that the road to private equity is not always the big 4 or large scale IB. That has not at all been our route. Our route has been through entrepreneurship. And, we're out here just trying to help other people that are trying to take that route do it. But nothing against the people doing it the old fashioned way either. Perfectly great way to do it. It's just not the route that we took. And so our perspective is what it is. Anyway, thank you guys for tuning in. Tune in every Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bring your questions, comments, concerns if you have any, hopefully not. And I've been Brody Vinson. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, probably a couple others that I haven't mentioned. And
Ryan Santo, you can find me on LinkedIn, RYANSANTO on LinkedIn. Just shoot me a message as well. Just let me know where you found me. And Grant, his final comment of the night is, meet a kid with good hair and provide him great value. Easiest way into PE, in my opinion.
That's crazy.
Yep, there
that's Grant's experience directly. So I'm apparently the guy with good hair. So on that note, I am going to go shave my head. Good night and have a great time.
Okay.
Just kidding, ladies and gentlemen. It'll still be here next week.